All right, let's talk about Season 3. You probably have heard a lot about it by now. The internet is aflame as usual. Let me give you my quick TLDR, and then I want to talk about how I want to talk about Season 3. I want to talk about what was the sales pitch for Season 3. I want to talk about what was the vision, like what, based on how they wrote about the changes and how they talked about what they did, what was the vision that they had in mind, and what did we get? But first, I'll give you the summary that I gave Twitter. By the way, YouTube, if you prefer to listen to this video without the background music, we've prepared a separate audio track for that using the YouTube language feature. So you can go to the gear below and select the other English audio track, and that one will just have no background music. Same exact video, though. If you do use that feature, let me know in the comments. I love getting feedback on if you prefer listening with or without music, if the volume is too high, things like that. Tekken 8 Patch 3.0 is not a small step in the right direction, but many steps in vastly different directions. Some characters were nerfed in solid ways that make a lot of sense. Anna's counter hit elbow, and down back 4 elbow, the low. Nina's back 2-2-2, Steve's armor, and Yoshi's 1-1. A lot of changes that make a lot of sense. People have been talking about them for a long time. Other characters got slaps on the wrist or were only buffed with no nerfs. And then sometimes weaknesses were intentionally removed. This contradicts the statement they made of focusing on strengths, weakness, and identity. The only consistent thing across the entire patch was a focus on making things easier. Unique tech and conversions were removed, offense was streamlined, and a lot of execution checks were just completely removed. Like, things were straight up made easier, and it was a key word they used over and over again in the patch notes. According to this patch, situational awareness is not something that should be heavily rewarded, and cool things keep getting removed or simplified. Generally, the vibes are down, and I'm personally pretty confused by the direction of the game. One thing I want to continue is somebody said, just say the patch is bad, Fee, it's not that hard. And this is my take. I want to play it and watch pros play it before jumping to conclusions. I don't think I'm smart enough to read the patch notes and immediately predict every future and every gameplay thing. I don't know enough about character-specific options unless I see it happen and see the character experts do it. So I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But my initial reaction is that it seems pretty bad, with some good stuff in there. I would like to see more of the good things represented across the cast and systems, but a lot of it is genuinely confusing to me. Lastly, I want to say that I think the actual quality of the game is not substantially better or worse than Season 2 after the emergency patches. This is basically the same game, but the biggest loss is, I think, faith in the developers to make meaningful changes. That's my TLDR take. Let's get to the meat of this thing, huh? What was the sales pitch? Back to basics. All right, we were sold adjustments that respect each character's concepts, strengths, and weaknesses while preventing excessive performance gaps between characters. So some people interpreted Back to Basics as going to before Tekken 8. Because of this quote I just read to you, I never saw it that way. I didn't think they would remove heat. I didn't think they would completely rework the movement, although I wish they would. I wish they would buff movement. It was clear they had a vision with Tekken 8. And to me, in my mind, it was clear that Season 2 was the misstep. Season 2 is when a lot of the problematic things came out, like extreme plus frames, homing, advancing moves that led into mix-ups, and a lot of like, why not buttons? Buttons that, why wouldn't you just press this? It makes too much sense. You're almost trolling if you don't use these buttons. So to me, before Season 2 dropped, Season 1 was showing a lot of movement in a direction of an aggressive modern Tekken that is easier, but still had a lot of cool interactions play out, still rewarded a lot of Tekken skill, and I thought the refinement would happen from there. So when Season 3 was sold on the idea of refinement, I thought that's where they would go. That's what Back to Basics meant to me. A lot of people on the internet were talking about it in different ways. That was my take. When the patch actually came out, we got to get a sneak preview into their vision. And this is where we can talk about a lot of the patch changes. I'll start quickly about the good changes because there's a lot of criticism I have. But I think the nerfs to Anna, Asuka, and Brian were pretty precise. I think that I was very vocal about Asuka's biggest offender to me being her charge move, giving her access to damage and pressure when she's supposed to be a character that relies on parries and defensive techniques. Something interesting too is in the actual patch notes, they talk about the character's design or what their vision is. Asuka is a character who excels at mind games using reversal and status techniques, leveraging cancels and delays to keep the opponent guessing. Okay, so that's their vision for Asuka. So when they added a new move, it allows her to cancel and, you know, keep them guessing so they run into a counter hit or a parry. They laid out a clear vision, which I can respect. Why does this move have to have particular sidestep left tracking in that case? You know what I mean? They did some precise nerfs to her offense, but also some compensation buffs that don't make too much sense to me. There were also precise Asuka and Brian nerfs. A lot of the complaints people had for a while were targeted. It's a bit rough that it was allowed to last for the entirety of Season 2, but regardless, they are good changes, and I think that's important to point out. The other thing I actually thought was decent about the patch was that for some of the characters' new moves, they were explicitly designed in a way that wouldn't warp gameplay. So Fakumram, for example, got up forward 3+4, which is a quick tornado option. One of the pain points for Fakumram, especially for newer players, is being consistent with his combos. So this move was basically set up just to make his combo game a little more stable. And if it doesn't do more damage than the optimal routes, then isn't that a pretty good change? A combo extension that works pretty well for newer players and intermediates, but doesn't give the reward unless you learn the hard execution ones. I think that type of change is beneficial. Shaheen had a similar change with getting a one-hit combo button conversion. And I think in terms of making the game easier, but not more rewarding, I think that's fine. I think that's actually pretty cool for onboarding newer players. Those are the main ones I can think of, though. There were a lot of misguided changes. Off the top of my head right away are the Hwoarang ones. The Hwoarang changes that stood out to me were the nerfs, because I think pretty much everybody should have gotten nerfed since Season 2. They made back one, his like evasive spin punch, -15, so now it's launch punishable by most of the cast. And they made his backlash, the power crush from right foot forward stance, have higher whiff recovery. And that's been a big complaint for a long time. One of the biggest skill checks is being able to launch that from Hwoarang. They made it easier. But they didn't at all touch his homing advancing low or his looping stance option, right flamingo 4-3. So now I'm really confused, because what that says to me is that their vision is they want these long-range homing moves to stay. They want these looping mix-ups to stay. And was that not the issue that led to the tanking Steam reviews at the launch of Season 2? That's where I'm confused. And then aside from that, nerfs like this to Fang's baby tantrum, down back 2-2-2, they made it more punishable and less rewarding on hit, but this move was not really a big enough issue, if you ask me. Like, it wasn't useless and it wasn't bad, but at a high level, you don't really see Fang players using this. So it almost feels like someone on the dev team was getting hit by this and was getting upset by it. It reminds me of Season 2, where they nerfed Dragunov's QCB2, the backsway elbow. It was a high risk, high reward option that was pretty hype, and they removed the tornado launch from it. It almost feels like somebody on the dev team was getting abused by that move, and it really bothered them. And by the way, I'm about to talk about a lot of problematic things, and if I mention a character that you play, I challenge you to not feel attacked. It's not about advocating for some characters to be bad or things like that, but for calling out flaws in the game design, okay? So hold back an emotional response and try and take it from the perspective of somebody who might play against your character. The biggest problem with this patch is, amidst the sprinkling of good changes and like pinpoint precision changes that make sense, they continued to make missteps that repeated the mistakes of Season 2. Let me take 1 second to show you what I mean. This is a document I put together showing the Season 2 changes. These are quotes from Nakatsu during an interview before Season 2. That in terms of strategy, I feel we weren't able to balance the defensive aspects that well. That's why for Season 2, we like to focus on defense in terms of the lateral aspects of a 3D fighting game and the ease of defending when being attacked. And this was a big point of controversy after the fact, because in Season 2's launch, they talked about a better sidestep, and the system does reflect that. Sidestepping is vastly improved from Season 1. However, what they didn't talk about is almost every character gained tools to mix up defensive opponents more easily, which directly contradicts the whole idea of the ease of defending when being attacked. Look at this. Asuka lacked sufficient tools to apply offensive pressure against defensive opponents. Season 2 strengthened follow-up options to make it easier to attack opponents moving sideways, tracking against leftward movement, making mix-ups harder to distinguish. These changes are seen throughout the cast in Season 2 last year. Here's a big one. Fang had few moves that could track opponents sidestepping to the left. To address this weakness, forward 4 has been adjusted to include tracking. The startup speed of one of his lows has been increased, making it easier to catch opponents. Hwoarang struggled to deal with opponents' lateral movement, so they gave him a low homing attack. The list goes on and on and on, and the most appalling one to me, I'll just show you two more ones that were really appalling to me. Lars. When opponents adapted and countered his options, it became more difficult than expected to use his stances. So they gave him more frame advantage. And this one, Shaheen's toolkit was somewhat technical, making him difficult to use effectively. This statement was mind-boggling. Shaheen had technical combos, and doing a quick slide is maybe a bit of a skill to learn. But I don't think Shaheen is a technical character outside of those things. So they gave him a new low that also evades highs and gives frame advantage. Season 2 did a lot of these things to make the game easier, to give people more coverage, and in general to make attacking better and make defending harder. So when we look at the problematic changes of Season 3, the list goes on and on and on. But here's a big one. Now, I know the Lee mains are going to be really vocal about this, but again, I need you to remove the emotional response and think about this. 1+2 goes into Hitman stance, right? And it's a plus on block homing mid, which is normally crazy, but because the stance he's in has defensive counterplay, it was like, fine. You could play sidestep right duck to get around almost every option here. Now, in Season 3, they made Lee's forward 2 track sidestep right, and it's a mid. So now if you use sidestep right duck, Lee can consistently track you with this option. And a lot of Lee mains are already saying, oh, it's a mid-high. I risk my life to call this out. You don't have to do the high. You don't have to do the high. Just do the mid, track him. They stop stepping. Now you have your mix-up again. And if you don't want to mix them, you can just slide again. By the way, slide now goes into Hitman stance, where he can frame trap with this option that tracks sidestep right duck. It is a mind-boggling coverage change that hits a weakness Lee had that I don't think really strong Lee mains were really complaining about. He didn't really need this. In a similar sense, Jack got this Gigas move from Tekken 7, and Lily cannot step his follow-up low poke after this hits you on block. So it's like a guaranteed mix-up, right? And Jack already has a lot of things that would de-incentivize you from trying to hit him right away. It's a slower move, right? But he has the Gamma Howl Flex, like the muscle armor that King has. He has a super fast counter hit forward too. So there's a lot of reasons you wouldn't just swing at Jack, and now that he has this move, once he gets you to stop swinging, he can get a forced mix-up on you. Is it the end of the world in terms of power level? No. But is it a healthy design that shows a shift away from the Season 2 design? No. I have more changes I want to show along these lines, but let me just also show you this new floor break on counter hit. On Kazuya's down back 2, there's this new bounce animation, and tons of characters have this added to their movesets. What this is if you get this bounce animation over an exploding floor, it triggers the floor hazard. So now you get a full combo. This is super game warping. This is not like a trivial change, especially on stages like this with so many floor blasts. This is a huge shifting of power across the board, and I am not sure if enough consideration was made to see how this behaves between the interactions across the cast. Tons of characters got this change. Jack has it off his forward 1, for example. It's all in people's individual patch notes, and I'll probably do a video covering like ways you'll have to fight against people's new changes. I feel like most character mains will probably look at the patch notes for their own character, but a general video maybe of like what you can expect to get hit by and defend against may be in the works. Okay, we talked about the floor breaks on counter hit, but this is another big thing that I think stands out across the whole patch is the phrase easier appears 52 times in the patch notes. And in 36 of those cases, it was making offense easier or streamlining it, and the word weakness only appears twice. So this is a consistent theme across the entire patch notes, but a big one I want to point out that is really, I think, frustrating for everybody involved are the Leo changes. So for those who don't know, high-level Leo players are actually pretty technical, and it's one of the enjoyment points of playing the character. For example, when this counter hits, you can pick that up for a combo, even though Jin is super far away. Leo has to do either deep dash instant while standing 3, I missed it there, so I didn't get a float, or in this game, I think Leo can do deep run forward 4 to pick up. And this was a common thing across a lot of Leo's counter hit launchers. But now they changed Leo's counter hits to give a different knockdown. So now Leo doesn't even have to work to get a follow-up here. They just fall down right in front of you. And this isn't on just that move. It's also on QCF 2-1. So they actively removed a point of enjoyment for the high-level players just to make it easier for other players. And the thing is, usually the cool part of a fighting game is kind of this learning progression, right? You have the hard things, and when you can't do the hard things yet, you do a level of progression to get there, right? There's no immediate reward, but that's what makes the game kind of fun. It's the same reason why like Dark Souls is fun for people. People enjoy the progression of failing and slowly getting better, right? They also did a quality of life change where down forward 2+3, it will now always pick up with while standing 3, as far as I know. They changed the ranges and the knockdown to make this consistent. But part of the recognition of playing a counter hit character is recognizing, hey, am I at the spacing where this is going to give me the follow-up? They've also removed that little bit of situational awareness. And yeah, look, even in the patch notes, it says that Leo is a technical character. Like, they acknowledge that that's part of Leo's identity. So why did they remove a bunch of the technical follow-ups? It really does not make much sense to me. Like, they said that they wanted to work with identity, strengths, and weaknesses, when in practice, they decided to continue to make characters easier. And again, my best guess is it's about performance gaps between characters. Shaheen used to do, here's a really whack combo, but after tornadoes, he would do full crouch down forward too. And if you were super technical at the game, like AK or low high, you could do cancels into sneak, cancel into crouch, and then do full crouch down forward too. It was really tight because you have to go from down back to down forward 2 on a nice timing. Now, Shaheen can do this button from the sneak stance. So from this stance, if he hits down forward 2, he now does this. So the cancel into crouch is no longer needed. So now everybody has access to this combo that used to be execution gated. And that makes very little sense to me, because the whole reward of doing this combo isn't just the visual appeal of it. It isn't just the damage. It's nailing the execution in an intense match after doing tons of practice to get it. That seems to be completely gone with this type of change. This is the type of easier they made the game. It's not upping the ease of entry or onboarding. It is lowering the ceiling so everybody can touch it. And that feels very rough to me. It's not something I like at all. It's a mistake from Season 2, and it was continued in Season 3. Anyways, back to the Twitter clips. Here is a clip from Whale in EU. It said, Lars has trouble getting in, so we improved his approach tools. This is his new dynamic entry 1, or 1+2, which was made -1 on block, and as you can see, Deviljin cannot defensively step against Lars's offense when he does this option. Orbital also evades jabs after. I did not see that entire clip. Also, dynamic entry 1-2 tracks the sidesteps in neutral, and there's a homing mid. So Lars is supposed to, by design, be able to get in for free, right? Run a mix-up if you try to challenge with the jab there. You can't sidestep it in either direction. If he does read a jab retaliation, his orbital now jumps over it. And if you try to sidestep preemptively to prevent that, dynamic entry 1-2 beats it. And then, if you try to sidewalk, dynamic entry 3 covers that. It is a full-on mix-up from a stance that is advancing. The whole complaint about Season 2 was that it felt like a casino game where you just had to guess, where offense was overwhelming. Improving the approach tools does not feel like a correction of that decision. It almost makes it seem like the phrase back to basics was back to Season 2. It doesn't check out with where most of the Tekken fanbase seem to be thinking. And the Tekken fanbase has a ton of different opinions. But at the very least, the rejection of Season 2 seemed like a point of common interest. And while we're talking about that type of offense, Law has a new move, up back 1+2, which is a homing high. It's +1 on block. But what's surprising about this move is he could do it from slide. So from the slide step, full crouch, he could do this. And it wall splats. So now, at the wall, slide would catch side steps, right? But you would lose the wall position sometimes. Other times you would keep the wall position. Now he can just go for a homing high with up back from crouch. Wow, apparently I'm the target audience. I can't even input that. With this, it's plus, and then he can continue to run his offense. Remember, he has 1-1-1. So that +1 actually really matters. And if you're down jabbing against Law, he has sidestep 1+2. Or even what? Sidestep 2? Sidestep 2 to dodge the down jab and wall splat you anyways. It's a very bizarre move choice to add when the idea of increasing defensive options has been floated before. Once again, if you look back at Season 2, they said the ease of defending when being tacked is something that wanted to be fixed. They missed the mark on that, and in Season 3, they continue to miss the mark on that. So I am pretty confused what the direction is. Again, keeping in mind the context that there were legitimately good changes weakening some characters' offense. I get the sense that when they said preventing excessive performance gaps between characters, that may have been the top priority. Right? They think about concept, strengths, weaknesses, identity, But the biggest priority seems to be preventing these perceived performance gaps, which is why you see a lot of nerfs for Anna, Asuka, and Brian, the tournament heavy hitters, but not a lot of nerfs and even some buffs on characters we just haven't seen that are going to push them completely over the edge, in my opinion. And while we're on Law, his heat regeneration still exists. They cut the values in half, so he doesn't get as much back, but he's still regenning heat, which is a mechanic that I think most people are not a fan of. This takes me pretty cleanly into the next point about Untouched Season 2 designs. One of the biggest gripes I've had with Season 2, and Lydia is not the main offender of this, but she is a huge problem with it. QCF4 is a homing high that goes into stance and gives a guaranteed follow-up, right? Which heat engages and leads to more stance pressure. And the complementary moves are forward, forward 2, and back 1. So the design of homing high and advancing mid from ranges where you cannot backdash is a big Season 2 problem. And even though Anna did get nerfed, she no longer has this counter hit 2 jab or counter hit down back 4 into the elbow. She still has this long range mix up. The knockdown situation was nerfed, sure, but the idea that in neutral you are considering a big linear power mid versus a big homing power high is alarming that it was able to stay here. And then there's still some stance looping issues with Leo in particular, but I don't want to harp too much on the exact same character. It just doesn't feel like there was a lot of consideration made into fixing the specific issues that Season 2 brought. And yeah, the vision in general is just confusing, right? But I think this, again, speaks to the whole power level thing. So this is Momodog, one of the most technical Devil Jin players in the world. And he is showing the change to Devil Jin's Hell Sweep. So that did 52 damage. I know the bitrate is kind of bad, so I'll call out the numbers. But here he gets to the wall and can convert into Spike with 66 damage before the Spike and then a guaranteed Steel Pedal. So that's an over 70 damage combo off of a launching Hell Sweep. Even Momodog, who is a big Devil Jin fan, is saying we should probably not buff this dumb low, the best low in the game. Hwoarang main Prophet, also a prominent tournament organizer, was talking about how it's a shame they didn't nerf Hwoarang's advancing low into stance, or the homing low crush wall splat heat engager, the right foot forward, down forward 3. Instead, they focused on the moves that a lot of early and intermediate players were complaining about. I'm gonna be honest, I don't whiff punch backlash, but that's a skill issue for me. Making that easier is less interesting to me than getting rid of the oppressive stuff that affects all skill levels, even at the very top. Whale also highlights that despite the Lydia nerfs, she still does a ton of damage, and Sezujin, another Lydia main, was also saying that she's debatably top 5, and if you don't see it, you might be blind. I might be blind. I read the Lydia changes and I wasn't sure. But these demonstrations, this is why I didn't want to make an immediate video the night of the patch, because I want to see what the character experts are coming up with. And yeah, this looks pretty scary. Even though they made changes to Lydia where she has to spend and consume stacks to have a bit more of a, I guess, tactical decision-making part to her game, she's still doing a lot. And then this is just a little bit of tech low-high showed off where because they made Shaheen's stance easier to go into with a button input, Shaheen can now wave dash. He can wave dash and he has a slide out of the wave dash. Yeah. And to add to the whole wanting to prevent performance gaps point, there are so many characters that got like fully buffed with no nerfs at all. Either there were no nerfs or there were nerfs that I don't think make up for how many buffs there were in a game where the power level just seems so high in general. King is a good example of this, where he did receive a nerf to the tracking on his counter hit down forward 2, but you'll understand that if you are placing it as a counter hit button, the sidestep would not be a huge issue in the first place, right? Because of hurtbox expansion. If you don't know that concept, you can check out my video on sidestepping. They made it easier to sidestep down forward 2 to the right, but in exchange, they've given him a new launching throw, and they allow him to do an evasive sidestep from his Jaguar sprint. So usually against Jaguar sprint, if a King is just going to keep running at you, you can try to mitigate the mix-up by swinging at him or swinging low to break the armor. But now he also has an evasive sidestep into throw off of the Jaguar sprint. And there hasn't been any adjustment, it seems, to his wall combo and the mix-up situation it creates after. Quite alarming. And I know King mains don't like being picked on, so there's also a huge amount of buffs to Victor with no nerfs at all. Victor's a really frustrating character for newer players to fight against because he has so much oppressive looping stance pressure. They even say it in the patch notes that he's a character who excels at overwhelming opponents through stances. So they gave him a new move that tracks sidestep right, which is his weaker side, and it can transition into stance, and it can be held down and charged for more plus frames and to become a counter hit launcher. They also made some of his stance cancel options faster, so they're harder to react to. I truly do not understand how these changes made it through. Even compared to Season 1, Victor is more annoying to fight against now. And if we go by the logic of what was said for Season 2, this still doesn't make sense. We know Season 2 didn't end up being a defensive patch, but the vision makes no sense to me. How are they making such good changes to some characters and making other characters worse? It makes me think it has to be that they're laser focused on keeping as many characters within the same performance range, keeping the game balanced. And my take on that is a balanced game is not necessarily a fun game. I think we're going to see that come to fruition with this version of the game. Again, I don't want to get too granular into the character changes. I just wanted to give as many like concrete examples as I could. But yeah, in general, the vision is just so confusing. Like, for example, they talked about Fang having a wide range of grounded options, strong countermeasures, and evasive movement. When I see grounded options, that usually means from like a standing position, right? If they say stances, they use the word stances. We saw that with Victor and a few other characters. But here they said Fang is characterized by a wide range of grounded options, which I assume to mean neutral, right? With that in mind, they made adjustments by buffing shifting clouds and giving him more entrances into shifting clouds. It was like they acknowledged openly that his strength was neutral, so they buffed his stances. That is a very confusing statement to me. One of the changes that I thought at first was a decent change, but turned out to maybe be not enough, was Nina's back 222. They changed it so the third hit no longer counter hit launches, which is good. If you watch the Arslan Ash versus Hisham mirror match, there were points in the match where they would just start swinging and just land the counter hit launch because they were counting on the other person ducking and trying to take control back from the match. But after seeing posts from Nina mains like Victim of Ritual, he pointed out that there are things that are still unaddressed, like back 222 being fully hit confirmable. If the first hit is a pink spark, I have time to see that and then rip the third hit only in that case, and it'll still be a 3-hit combo. Obviously, if you fully delay it, you don't get that, but there's plenty of time during the first 2 hits to make that hit confirm, and that was left untouched. In my mind specifically, the fact that it was nerfed at all, I see as an upside compared to the characters that have been, like, completely buffed. And as if that doesn't hammer the point home enough, yeah, Ao Richie, like, one of the premier Leos of the world, even is upset about this, and it was in response to my tweet listing out the buffs and nerfs, and you'll see that almost everything is a buff except the removal of the heat dash pickup, which is kind of a character specific strength that I think is sometimes cool. Like, I'm not a Leo fan, but I think character specific stuff in fighting games is pretty cool, and it's not egregiously overpowered, especially if you're able to adjust the other parts of the character's kit. But instead, they've made Leo easier to execute, stronger, and taking away the cool stuff. It feels so backwards from a fighting game from my perspective. So hopefully that makes it clear how the vision was kind of confused. That's why I said many steps in many different directions, is because there are some good changes. There are a decent amount of, you know, they're nerfs, so we appreciate them, but are they targeted enough? Are they accurate enough? And then there are straight up repeated mistakes from Season 2 that just don't make much sense to me. And that's what we got. We got an execution of what feels like a confused vision. There are also some positive changes too, like the fact that there are many bug fixes and stability improvements. Those are the kinds of changes you would expect during a season though, and yet they held it for Season 3. I'm starting to get the sense that this feels like a manpower issue. If you have these bug fixes that are known, if you have balance changes that are known that should be happening mid-season 2 and not getting that done, I really get the sense that it feels like they have one dev. He's supposed to fix all the bugs, implement the new characters, and create the new moves for characters. It no longer makes sense in terms of, like, the argument they gave back then was competitive stability. A bug fix should not be something held back for competitive stability. It's a bug fix. It's a stability fix. And I think that's why a lot of people are so disappointed. The season didn't have a ton of design or philosophy shifts. It didn't show a good understanding of the previous mistakes. It felt rushed in some ways, well thought out in tiny ways, and kind of lost and all over the place. What adds a lot of insult to injury and kind of affects the ability to have faith in the development team and confidence in the team is they've introduced new bugs. These bugs aren't even new to this patch. The last time they added charge moves in Season 2, there was a bug where if you mashed the input, you could instant charge it. Asuka Kazama had this. That bug has returned with Heihachi's charge move. By mashing up back 1+2, you get an instant full charge. This should have been something that got tested when you decided to add a move just like before. On top of that, they removed Heat Smash wall splats. Great change from a design standpoint. If you whiff the Heat Smash, it will still wall splat. This is the current change, which we like, no wall splat. But if Yagami backdashes and it whiffs, the second hit wall splats. And the crazy part is, this is only on some of the characters. Jin Kazama, if he whiffs his Heat Smash, it still does no combo, which is good. That's the intended design. But almost every other character who has this Heat Smash will still get a wall splat on whiff. It makes no sense. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's everyone but Jin, yeah. So it feels like they only tested it thoroughly for Jin. The lack of QA, the repeated mistakes, it just doesn't look very good. They made a quality of life change too about making heat engage wall splats more consistent, but now it's leading to unintended behavior where people are wall splatting from downtown. That wall splat, look at how far they are from the wall. And Dragunov did not need it to be easier to wall splat off 1-2-1. And it's across many characters in the cast. Lily also wall splats easier off of Feisty Rabbit too. But here's probably the most egregious one. Because they changed the speed of going into Gamma Howl, there is now a loop Jack has where he can stomp on you in heat and it will truly loop into another stomp, leading to guaranteed damage. And there's a cool new setup, and based on how they've been behaving before, I imagine this setup's going to be removed. This is off of the new counter hit knockdown. You see that? This is the floor breaking knockdown, but it leads to tech like this. So he gets a grounded stomp if you don't move. If you tech roll, he can jump over you, back throw you, and this back throw destroys walls. Usually it's rare for that to happen, and this is kind of a cool tech trap. Like, usually I'd be cool with this type of change, but I think this change only exists because of the oversight with the new knockdown, which they wanted to include because they wanted a new mechanic for the season, which is counter hit floor breaking with giving a full combo. In terms of what I'm going to do from here now, I'm not sure what can be done. I love creating content focusing on Tekken's systems and like the core Tekken engine, how the movement interacts with defensive play, and how even though there are a lot of offensive options, usually the defense outstrips it. And I love sharing how high-level players have had so much mastery over these systems for such a long time. Teaching this game allows me to kind of share that joy with people who haven't gotten to experience it before. It's just harder to do that in the current climate where everybody is angry, everybody is dooming, and the changes aren't supporting a positive direction, and that makes me sad. I didn't think the game was going to be fixed in like one seasonal update, but I thought the success condition of Season 3's launch was going to be restoring faith in the dev team, and unfortunately I don't think they accomplished that goal. All that said, I don't think, again, this game is going to be in a much worse state than Season 2 post-emergency patches. It's actually a similar game. Pros are calling it Patch 2.5, or Season 2.5. They did say they're going to be updating more frequently, but as we saw, the validity and the trust in their word is at an all-time low. Until we get updates and maybe there's competitive improvement, I'll probably be playing just more characters to try and learn as much as I can about the cast at a base level. Maybe that'll help me teach more people. And yeah, I always say this, if you still like the game, keep playing it. Like, it's basically the same game. If you don't like the game and you don't want to support the developers or the practices, then there's other stuff to do out there. In the meantime, I'll be watching pro play and trying to see where cool stuff is still being done. Because as much as this patch was honestly pretty ugly, I always look at high-level Tekken play and see things that I enjoy or things that I want to learn. So I will continue to try to share that with everybody. That's all I have. Thanks for sticking around for this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.